Hello, welcome back. Welcome to Unit 3 about common law. In this series of videos, we will cover how common law was born and how it evolved into case law made by judicial precedents and the equity. Also, we will study examples of judicial precedents of case law. On the other hand, you will see the statute law and its different types such as legislation, custom, books of authority, and human rights. So let's start describing the origin of common law that dates back to the Middle Age. So, at the beginning, there were different laws for each region across the UK. The rules were not written down, and judges were sent by the monarch to hold cases in the king's courts across the country. Therefore, the cases were decided based on local customs. After that, the decisions started to be recorded, and the judges can read about the decisions made by other judges. That meant the raising of doctrine of judicial precedents. In this doctrine, the judge is obliged to follow the judicial precedent if the case that he will decide about is similar to the precedent. This system turned into the common law, which is applicable to all the people. Now, common law includes case law and equity. So, let's take a look to the concept of case law or the doctrine of judicial precedents. It includes all the judge's decisions from all type of courts. A judge's decision in a case becomes a precedent when it is binding on similar cases heard in courts at the same level or lower down the legal system hierarchy. Next, I will describe two key concepts that will better explain case law. The first concept is the precedent. In general English, it means a previous instance or case which is or may be taken as an example of rule for subsequent cases. The other concept that I would like to explain is the concept of binding. What means that a decision is binding? It means that the same level courts or lower courts must follow the decision made by the judge of the higher courts. So let's take a look to an example of legal system which is located in the UK. So, today decisions of the higher courts, which are somewhat comparable to trial courts in the United States, do not bind any other courts, but serve merely as persuasive authority for other high courts and inferior courts. If you go one step up, the courts of appeals bind the high courts below them and, under unusual circumstances, bind the Court of Appeals rendering the decision. Finally, at the top, we have the House of Lords, which is equivalent to the United States Supreme Court. They are strictly binding on all lower courts and on the House of Lords itself, though the court has established a practice of overruling precedents when they are determined to be unsatisfactory. In case law, precedent is considered a source of law, whether it is based on one decision or 100 decisions. So, we said that case law includes judicial precedents, but you know that the judicial precedents may have dozens of pages, even hundreds. Therefore, case law is not integrated by the whole judgment. So, what is binding in a court decision? Well, the only part of the decision that is binding is the ratio decidendi, or the rule of the decision, as opposed to comments made by judges that are not relevant to the court's decisions. Other matters referred to in the judgment but not directly related to the case are called obiter dicta and may be persuasive in related cases but are not binding. So let's take a look to an example of an important judicial precedent. The case is called Carlyle versus Carbolic Smoke Ball Company from 1893. In this case, Mrs. Carlyle started a claim against the manufacturer of the carbolic smoke ball, which was a device for preventing colds and flu. The manufacturer had promised a reward of £100 for anyone catching flu despite the use of its product, but when Mrs. Carlyle caught flu after using the product, he refused to pay out. So, the court decided that this promise, together with Mrs. Carlyle's use of the product, stands for a legally binding contract, and she was entitled to the reward. So, the rule of the decision explores many of the principles that apply in modern day contracts, such as offer and acceptance, before we can make legally enforceable agreements between each other. So, this is an example of how a judicial precedent is now applied in modern contracts.